this is Evelyn Lopez. Welcome to Sustainability in Your Ear, the Earth911.com podcast for the week of November 25th, 2019. We are coming to you from the very beautiful today Moonyard Studios in North Tacoma. It's a sunny day in Tacoma. And this week, we're going to talk about things you can do, real things you can do to change your emissions. We're going to talk about electric vehicles, the future of green real estate, passive house design, which is actually a positive, not a negative. And we're going to finish up with something that I'm definitely trying, which is how to upcycle some pet toy projects to play with your puppies. So welcome. Today, Mitch Radcliffe, where are you coming to from today?
Well, I'm in Tacoma in Lakewood, Washington, and enjoying the Northwest's beautiful early winter weather.
Yeah, may not last long, but it's pretty right now. And our Earth911 writer, Sarah Lozanova. Sarah, where are you today?
I am in brisk mid-coast Maine.
How are things in Maine?
How
little
brisk?
chilly, kind of icy, right around freezing. Winter is upon us.
Oh,
The best time of the year.
very good. So are you getting ready for Thanksgiving next week?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
should say this week, yeah. Very good. All right. Well, let's talk about emissions. Let's start out. We have a great story with, and it is jam-packed with really useful information on electric vehicles. How big a difference does buying an electric vehicle make? So, Mitch, you want to start us off? Was this your story? It looks like it.
Yeah, I did a lot of the work on this story. What we wanted to do was give people the ability to calculate a fairly accurate estimate of how much they would save in terms of money and emissions from switching from an internal combustion engine car or ICE vehicle to an EV or electric vehicle. And, there are about 1.18 million electric vehicles on the road as of the summer of 2019. But there are a whole slew of new electrics coming. And in fact, during the course of the last couple of weeks, Ford has announced their first fully electric SUV, which is part of the new Mustang line that they're putting out.
Yeah.
They also announced a Mustang with a 900 horsepower electric engine. So if you really want to go fast, you can do that now too.
Amazing.
And up to 350 miles. So there's a lot of new options coming to market as battery technology improves, as auto manufacturers embrace the idea that electric is the future of transportation. But how much does that really make a difference where you are?
Yeah, well, and start out by telling us, changing to an electric vehicle, I mean, I'll tell you, most of the people I know, and you may be the exception, but most of the people I know were as seduced by the appearance as by the idea of changing to an electrical vehicle. So tell me first, what kind of difference does it really make to change from a regular emissions vehicle to an electric vehicle?
Well, and this is a relative statement depending on where you live. In a state where you have very low fossil fuel based power, like Washington State, where we happen to be, which is the number one state in the country in terms of of renewable energy. Only 15.3% of Washington State's electricity is generated from fossil fuels. It makes a huge difference. In Washington State, what we did was actually provide a worksheet that you can use for yourself. And I used the example of the transition I made from an internal combustion engine to an EV, where I went from getting 17 miles to the gallon, and I drive an average of 45 miles a day, unfortunately. And so I'm racking up about 16,500 miles a year. That equals about 966 gallons of gas. So we're talking about, somewhere between $2,700 and $3,800 in expense based on how much the gas costs. And then we also provide the ability to calculate how much CO2 you're generating and how much less CO2 you would based on the state you live in. So, for instance, in Washington, where only 15% of the CO2 or of the power is coming from CO2 emitting fossil fuels, you make a huge difference. I'm actually cutting my CO2 by about 35%. Just that move made that change.
Wow.
On the other hand, if I lived in somewhere like Rhode Island, where 95% of the power is coming from fossil fuels, it would not make much of a difference to switch to an EV because you're still generating the electricity for the EV from fossil fuels. And so what we wanted to do is give people the ability to look at the net impact, both financially and in terms of emissions. And it's an interesting outcome. In many cases, it's not going to be a particularly effective change, but it's also the basis for going back to your utility or back to your state and say, we need more renewable energy so we can make this transition and make it meaningful for the planet. So we worked all this out. You can make a huge difference in roughly 13 states where less than half the power is generated by fossil fuels. And those states are Washington, Vermont, Idaho, South Dakota, the District of Columbia, which of course is not a state, New Hampshire, Oregon, New York, Illinois, South Carolina, and Tennessee, and Maine. Oh, and Kansas. I take it back.
Okay.
So these are states where you're going to make at least a 15 to 30% difference in your CO2 emissions by switching to an electric vehicle. And then you're starting to talk about a meaningful difference. In the state of Washington, the state of Vermont, and Idaho, where they're all at 20% or below, it can make a huge difference. So
let's drill down with that a little. So what you're saying is that in the states where the power generation is not significantly fossil fuel based, then the power that's generating the electricity to go into your vehicle is not creating that much in terms of emissions. So your impact in reducing emissions is really magnified.
Right.
But let me ask you, in the states where your power is generated through fossil fuels, and we'll take Rhode Island as the biggest, but it looks like, the whole sort of northeast central Atlantic has some similar
Wyoming
numbers.
Too.
Wyoming too. So in those states, even then, yes, they should change, and I hope they're working on it, for the future. But even if they don't change, I think you're still seeing a savings if you change to an electric vehicle, because then you're not adding, okay, your power generation facility is creating emissions, definitely, whether you are driving an electric car or not, to power your house, your dishwasher, all the things in your life, it's creating emissions. But, your car, at least, would not be.
Right. And there's no reason not to consider moving to an electric vehicle simply to be more sustainable and to express to the car makers that's the kind of car you want. That's what's going to move us forward, and that's why we're seeing all these vehicles starting to come to market. But and Sarah, chime in here, because I know that you've thought a lot about this from your perspective in the home, which we'll be talking about later. The problem, the problem with saying my state is that your local utility may be one of the extremely green ones. And that's why you want to go do a little research to find out if they're using wind or solar or something to offset their fossil fuel generation in any way. And that could result in a much larger change, even though you live in Wyoming. You might be in one of the 12% that is roughly that is renewably sourced. And so this is only an estimation based on states. You really need to find out what your local utility is doing.
Yeah, and another thing to consider, Mitch, is a lot of customers are able to buy green power through their utility. There's many programs where basically the concept is that green power is being added, be it wind or solar or things like that. When people
using offsets.
A program. Yeah. And then also another thing to consider, if people have the means, there's also the concept of installing solar on the home and then charging the vehicle from the solar.
Right. And all these things can be put together. And what we're trying to do with with this article and others that will be coming out is suggest the things you can do to make these differences that are big investments. And, what we have is a 10-year plan. Each year has a big investment. Making your house solar, buying an EV, switching to a more sustainable approach to food sourcing and things like that. And so we want to help people make small and large changes. These are large changes, and they do require some money, but the payoff can be a substantial decrease in your auto spending. For instance, I'm spending at least $1,000, if not $1,500 less a year on transportation. That's a good thing. On the other hand, I'm also reducing my CO2 emissions because I live in a very green power state. all of this we have to factor into our decisions. And if you want to make a really big difference in your CO2 emission here, you may find that putting solar on your house is the first and most important thing to do, because that'll take you off the fossil fuel grid for the most part. And then the investments you make in the car and other things afterwards will be powered by renewable power and therefore less emitting.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also helpful to consider the energy mix where you live, the cost of the energy, and then you can kind of start prioritizing things. So if there's already a greener energy mix, and starting, the first major purchases you're saying, Mitch, could then be buying an electric vehicle. And if you're in a state with really dirty power, or you're not able to join a program, to put clean energy into the grid, then starting with solar might be a really good idea, especially in areas with high electricity rates.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. And I can see,
And one of the things to keep in mind about the way we generate CO2 now is that the average American's carbon footprint is about 21.5 metric tons per year. That's 47,000 pounds of CO2 that we're putting out. If you make these choices and you move down the emissions ladder to somewhere in the 4 metric ton range per year for each member of your household, we're getting close to the level of sustainable living that we need to be. We don't have to completely stop emitting carbon, but we have to figure out how to reduce it as much as possible and then offset it by doing additional projects like pulling carbon out of the atmosphere or planting trees. We can get to a net zero economy, but it's going to require each of us to make decisions about how we contribute to the carbon level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really good to start thinking about it in terms of the finances too. I noticed on the list of states, Hawaii is 82% powered through fossil fuels. And I also know that gas prices in Hawaii are traditionally quite high. So, if you live in Hawaii and have an opportunity to put solar on your house, that could be an enormous positive savings for you.
Right. And so you reduce your house output and then you plug in an electric car.
Right.
Now you've limited your gas output. And this is how we start to carve away at our impact.
Mm-hmm.
I was just also going to point out that electric vehicles typically require less maintenance than gas vehicles. And that's because the battery and the motor and the associated electronics don't require regular maintenance like they do in other cars. And
they're not as frictive. There's less friction in the machine, and they don't leak oil like a car. There's all sorts of benefits to switching to an EV that are not quantified in this analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and brake wear is reduced from regenerative braking systems.
Yeah, I actually don't use the brake anymore.
Oh, wow.
Really?
The way that I drive a BMW i3, which does regenerative braking, and I seldom step on the brake. So yes, I take that car in once a year to have it checked, and so far nothing has needed to be fixed.
That's interesting. I was going to mention another story that we had some time ago, not too long ago, but a while ago. I think it was, Sarah, one of your stories on the pricing of electric vehicles. And it was really interesting because there are some models that are really pretty comparably affordable compared to, their sort of non-electric counterparts. Mm-hmm. So I think if people are looking at this, go back in on the website and find that story too, because it was really helpful.
And there's a link in the story to that.
Oh, good. Great.
So if you're interested in figuring out how much you can save in terms of money and carbon output, we have a worksheet and a list of all the state percentages so you can do the math yourself.
Well, so if it's not a car you're thinking about, what about reducing emissions in the real estate industry? Sarah, you have a really interesting story, real estate industry reducing carbon emissions. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's basically talking about what the real estate market is doing and how some real estate industry companies are reducing their carbon emissions. And the premise of this is that commercial buildings account for almost 40% of global carbon emissions. So if we're really going to take on this issue, commercial buildings are a really important place to start. And so the Urban Land Institute has created an organization to help the industry reduce their emissions. And so they've put out some really interesting information on findings. But basically, it's a membership-based organization that represents major investors and financial institutions, and they're taking on this issue. And so in the report, it's showing that a lot of the member organizations have been significantly reducing their energy intensity, or around like 17% in the past 10 years. And so I also examined how there's a rising demand for this, especially as millennials start to be more engaged in renting apartments and commercial spaces and such.
So do you see millennials and Gen Z asking for LEED housing or sustainably proven housing in the future? Is that going to be a criteria for renters or home buyers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure, but I know that a lot of studies have showed that they're willing to pay more for green products. Mm-hmm. And there's obviously a clear connection with real estate. So I think that would be likely, or also just asking, about energy bills, because that is a real tangible thing for people that have to pay their own energy bills, so it makes a property a lot more appealing if it has low energy bills. So there's also kind of that whole financial payoff too.
And how do you see city regulations, building, zoning, and otherwise impacting this? And you point to the example of Vancouver, it's shooting for target zero in 2030.
Yeah, I mean, I think that local governments can do a lot to really push the industry, and you've seen that a lot with various policies. And Vancouver is a great example in what they've taken on. Having a target of zero carbon emissions by 2030. And so that really helps to launch the industry in that direction. So you're seeing like a lot of like passive house certified buildings in there. And so I think a lot of times if local governments are working along with us, there's the market demand, there's policies, it really helps shape the buildings that are being constructed then. And if you consider too that the buildings are around for so long, many of them are here for 100 or more years. So the more efficient they can be, for new construction, it has a huge long-term impact too.
Yeah, there's a great book by Stuart Brand that came out about, I don't know, might have been 20 years ago, How Buildings Learn. And buildings are repositories of the way we do things. And so they become smarter over the course of time. And it's interesting how Passive House is starting to inform this. The LEED program that is for commercial buildings. All of these are starting to change the buildings and the environment that we're in. As you look at this, what guidance would you give the listeners about how to start to tap into information about the sustainability of their housing or where they do business?
It's a great question. I think one indication is just how energy efficient the building is, especially if they live in a more extreme climate, be it extremely warm or extremely cool, is the HVAC equipment energy efficient? Are there gaps in the building envelope, that are letting in leaks and things like that? There's energy audits that are available. And I think, as far as like purchases and stuff, it's good to consider the energy intensity of the materials that went into constructing the building. And that's one of the hot topics right now in green building, because even if an insulation saves energy, what kind of greenhouse gases were created to produce that insulation. So you don't necessarily want to kind of always assume that a more energy efficient product is necessarily the greenest choice. So considering the energy intensity of the materials that go into a project is really important.
Well, I think that's a good segue to the other story we had, which is about passive houses and passive house design by Natalie Leonard, who's with Passive Design Solutions. She's a passive house consultant and builder.
Yeah, I thought this was really interesting. I hadn't actually encountered the concept of a passive house, but it's interesting to me, from the diagrams and the descriptions, that it has a lot of the features of sort of the old-fashioned style of living that our grandparents did, before they had ready access to air conditioning, things like, opening up all of your windows in the morning hours and then pulling the shades and keeping the afternoon sun out. But the house is doing it for you.
Well, Sarah, you live in a passive house, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I can actually highlight some of the basic.
Yeah, tell me about that.
So, I do live in a northern environment, so it's a heating dominated climate, so we think, our heating bill is much higher than our air conditioning bill. So we have a lot of large south facing windows in all of our homes. There's 36 homes built to the passive house standard in my neighborhood. And so they all have a lot of south facing windows, a fair amount of east and west facing windows, and very few north facing windows. And then that's also helpful, like to keep the, basically we don't have tall trees on the south side of the homes, to allow the winter sun to really come into the homes. And then in the summer, the angle of the sun is much higher. And so the east and west windows, I have curtains on, so I can draw them to keep out the morning or afternoon sun and to keep the home cool. So my house doesn't have an air conditioner, although I live in Maine, so I don't know that I would otherwise. And then I also have a ventilation system because my home is nearly airtight. The contractor actually did a blower door test on the home to test the air exchanges per hour and things like that. So it's a very airtight home, but with that, you need fresh air then. So, to exhaust moisture and cooking fumes, all kinds of stuff. So I have a heat recovery ventilation system.
So Natalie suggests that you can get 70% power savings from using a passive house. How does that map to your experience?
I've been really impressed with how the house performs. I never lived in the house before. It wasn't like it was redesigned, so I've only lived in this home, but I've actually read that the homes can be 80% more efficient than for heating and cooling than an average code-built home. And I would believe it because a lot of mornings I'll have the thermostat set, say, on 65 on a sunny but very cold day. And my home will often warm up like 10 degrees, even if it's 20 or 10 degrees outside. It did this the other day. It was probably in the 20s and windy all day, but my home got up into the 70s. Wow. And I had the heat set in the mid 60s. So it can often heat up like an extra 10 degrees during the day on sunny days, and then often maintain quite a bit of that heat into the nighttime. So we actually had a 5-day power outage in 2013, and my home lost about 2 degrees a day, but it was actually winter time. And so neighboring homes were below freezing, within like
inside.
40, Yeah. So basically, neighbors down the road and stuff were trying to prevent frozen pipes 14 hours after the power failed. Whereas our homes, lost maybe 2 degrees or 3.5 a day. It was really pretty remarkable.
So, and the other thing that the article goes into is why people sort of resist this, and they're concerned that it will cost more. But what you're describing is, even though it might cost 5 to 15% more to build the house, the energy savings sound like they pay that back relatively quickly. Is that what you found?
Yeah, I have a solar system on my home, but before I installed that, and I live in Maine, which I think has kind of middle of the road electric rates, if I'm not mistaken. And I have all electric heat. And I believe the highest winter electric bill was about $120 a month.
That's really low.
People who spend, $500, $600 heating their home in the winter. Although I do have it is a fairly small home. It's about 900 square feet.
So, and this is the other thing that I saw in response to the story is a couple of people said, yeah, passive houses, there's a whole bunch of fadism in passive houses. Have you seen that? How would you ground a good decision rather than just follow somebody who's pushing their own idea?
I mean, I think to look at how, the homes perform over time, like what, because I think there's a lot of factors to take into account. Like, are they durable? Are these mechanical ventilation systems going to break? Is the indoor air quality poor? Because I think a lot of times, it's 20 years later down the road that we look back and say, oh, oops, that didn't work for this or that reason. So really kind of looking critically at the elements and the durability of the building and the construction to see if it's a home that you'll want to live in, in the future. And there is an extra upfront cost, though, like the windows and doors that I have in my home are triple pane. We have more insulation than is required by code. But a lot of the materials are actually quite durable. Like I have a metal roof, and that has a 50-year design life, so it was more expensive than an asphalt roof, but long-term it isn't. So I think a lot of these things, it depends on what kind of time horizon you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it would be a very logical fit with sort of the smart home concept, too, with more and more things being tied into your smart devices to, make for an entertaining and, efficient house. This would seem like be a good match for that.
Yeah, I've been doing some experimentation with Internet of Things in the home, smart home, and there are a lot of limitations still. But I think that the combination of using technology to manage what's going on in the house, adding solar like Sarah's suggesting, you can get this house to be net zero or even contributive to carbon reduction if you do it right. But we need a lot of sensors and things like that are going to be self-powered rather than driven by the power coming into the house. And we had a story a couple of weeks ago about how researchers are finding all these new ways to pull power out of ambient light in the room, out of the darkness at night, all sorts of incredible ways that will, the little devices will be powered by themselves. And so those will add to our ability to understand and manage our home environment. So I'm very enthusiastic about this, and our next house will be a passive house with solar. But I also would like to be able to have greater control over it so that, the 2 degrees of change in the day or reducing water or eliminating toxins in the air will be taken care of by the house as well.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating. I live in a, mid-century modern, a 1968 house, and it's, which I love very much, but all of these, the features that are in the new builds are so attractive. I can definitely see wanting to do that. Definitely.
And Sarah, did you have to find somebody who was a specialist in building this material or building these types of homes, or do people understand how to do this increasingly?
I think it does help to find a firm that is experienced in this, because it also impacts the design of the home itself as well as the construction. So in our case, we joined a project that had a green builder developing the homes, the passive house standard. There's a certification too that professionals can get, like architects and builders, to be passive house accredited professionals. So that can be a good thing to look for when selecting building professionals. But we joined an existing project that was being built, so we didn't have to really search for that. And the builder had experience building homes to this standard. But as far as what I saw, because I was living on site when some of the homes were being constructed, like air sealing is a really big deal. And so air sealing all the windows and the gaps and the cracks and the envelope and things like that. So I think that's one thing that's really important to keep in mind, on the construction team.
Sarah, when were the houses in your project built? How old are they?
2012 to 2014.
Okay, so you've got a 5-year track record so far on how things are aging, and anything unexpected or anything that you sort of think, oh, I wouldn't have done that.
No, I mean, I would say The homes have been I find my home very comfortable, and there really haven't been any surprises, especially related to its energy performance. And what's funny is when you had the discussion about smart homes, I was actually thinking how little I actually think about the heat. I just keep it on the low 60s, and the home usually is much warmer than that, especially when it's sunny. And then I'll occasionally kind of bump up the heat in the bedrooms at night. So I feel like I barely even fuss with the thermostat, because a lot of it just kind of takes care of on its own. Or I just make little micro adjustments, at nighttime or something.
That's interesting. That's really good.
Yeah, it just kind of seamlessly ends up being very comfortable. And they're also very quiet homes. Like, I live in the country, so I don't know that it's such a big deal, but I would think that a passive house would be really nice, just because they're so quiet, in urban settings.
Yeah, the insulation makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and just not having gaps and cracks, and having windows.
Yeah, that actually would be nice to have a quiet house when you've got neighbors all around you.
Or road noise, all the things. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so now that we've got the house taken care of, the electric vehicle taken care of, and our commercial property, let's talk about our dogs.
It's definitely time to take care of our dogs.
So there's a nice story about how to take things around the house and make dog toys. And this is a contribution from Sharon Elber, who is a new writer for Earth911, and she came up with 3 great ideas. One of which is a tug braid you make from old T-shirts and shirts. She explains how to do the lanyard stitch to make it that way, and you create a rounded rope that you can toss or make a tug toy. But my favorite was the hide-a-treat dog mat.
Yes.
Because my dogs love to search. I can do that with a pile of laundry, put the ball in there. But this is a mat with fabric that you've recovered from around the house, strung through the mat. To make a kind of complex, tangled mess in which you hide dog treats. And this looks just like a lot of fun for the dog. Which one of these did you like?
I liked the mat also, because I thought, I think I have materials on hand in my house right now to make something like that. I liked the rope toy also, but I haven't noticed that our dogs do as much of that type of play. But I think they would they're very food oriented, so I think they would love the hide-a-treat.
I also like that. So she also has one where it's a set of plastic jars that are strung on a dowel, basically, that the dog can tip in order to get the treats out. And on the one hand, I kind of feel like this is the way we make dogs into Skynet. Where they learn so much, they take over.
But I think they would be, we have both dogs and cats, and I think dog overlords would be far more generous to us than cat overlords.
Yes, having recently spent a week and a half in a cat house, I am not in the slang sense of the word, but a cat owning house. I would not want to be controlled by the cats.
No. So maybe we should train our dogs so that they have a little bit of a fighting chance in taking over.
I think that's a good idea. So the third one, the puzzle toys, were I thought really interesting, and the more that you watch a dog play and learn, I think it's just fascinating to watch their brains come to life about that stuff.
Yeah, I like the idea of using an old muffin tin, and covering up all the top of them with the tennis balls, and then some of them have little kibble treats. And I think what that is then the dog has to, figure out by smell. Or maybe, just search and find which ones are treat-bearing and which ones are not.
I like the idea of the upcycled tug braid, just because I find I have, like right now I have a torn pair of sheets, and I'm trying to figure out what, if there's any way to reuse them or make rags out of them, but I actually don't really need any more rags. So I like the idea of kind of making value-added things out of old T-shirts and sheets and jeans and things.
Yeah, fleece was another one that she suggested. And, I think that's a good idea. You have to be aware of how much plastic, microplastic, you're producing as a result of it, though.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, and we certainly have a lot of old T-shirts around the house that I think could be recycled this way. This is sort of off point, but I have thought a couple of times about trying to make a braided rug out of old T-shirts, but I haven't gotten beyond the idea of just thinking, I wonder if you could. And I'm sure you could.
I bet you could. If you end up doing it, let us know. I'd be curious how it turns out.
I will let you know. I just have to figure out the lengths of the strips. You know,
right.
If you can, I don't know if it works if you've got a bunch of short lengths.
Color scheme that you like.
Yeah. We'll see.
Or would you just use a whole bunch of colors, or do you think you'd try to narrow it down to a few?
I think I'd probably narrow it down to a few, but a whole bunch of colors might be more fun.
Probably depends on the decor of the room.
Mm-hmm. I think with the dog items, too, our dogs are kind of destroyers. They like to, take things and shake them and, chew the eyes off of the stuffed animals, that sort of thing. And so I think the other positive of this is that the braided dog toy looks really sturdy and like it could go for quite some time without being torn to shreds.
Yeah, and some of this probably just depends on the temperament of your dog and what they enjoy and how rough they are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have a puppy, and so everything's rough at our house and destroyed.
Yes, exactly.
Hopefully not your slippers.
No, that went outside last night.
Oh.
Where's the slipper, Miriam? Mm-hmm. Oh, it's outside.
Outside. What are their favorite toys? What do you think they would like the best of all of these?
Well, I have a ball-centric dog, so who is literally fixated on the ball. We'll sit and look at the ball until it gets thrown. So that's the main one. But the puppy is a tugger. So I'm going to make one of the ropes, the braided ropes.
Good.
And again, I want to train the dogs to become Skynet. So
yeah, exactly. So it's a good investment.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, anything else we have before we get into Earthling questions?
Well, we've had a few interviews since the last show.
Tell us about them.
I had to take a week-long break due to an illness in my family, but we did continue our innovator interviews, and particularly I really enjoyed the conversation with Alice Hill, who's a former Department of Energy bureaucrat, who with Leonardo Martinez Diaz wrote a book called Building a Resilient Tomorrow, How to Prepare for the Coming Climate Disruption. And we started the conversation around Norfolk, Virginia, which is actually one of the first cities in the country which is dealing with sea level rise and subsidence of the land. And so they're, even though it's a conservative community, are very actively engaged in dealing with the consequences of global warming. But we talked more about how transparency with companies and government regulation will help people make better decisions. Talked about the fact that there are incredible liability lawsuits poised in the offing because of climate change, and those could be a company like PG&E being sued by the state of California, for instance. On the other hand, it could be a city being sued for having zoned a community for homes, and then have those homes be disrupted by rising seas. So there's a lot of legal issues to be anticipated and dealt with. And it's a great book from Oxford University Press, Building a Resilient Tomorrow. There's a link on the site if you want to find it. Highly recommend that interview. We also talked with the team that created an app called Evie, which coaches you on sustainable living. Essentially watches where you are, like at the grocery store, and then makes suggestions. There's another interview that was released just on Friday with Geeky, Giki, which is a shopping app in the UK that actually helps you determine what the product on the shelf in front of you costs the planet and society. So it has a corporate social responsibility component that you can scan a barcode and get a report on the company and the product.
Wow.
All of these things are the beginning of the kind of coaching and information that we're going to be able to have access to in order to make these better decisions. So I thought both of those were great points of reference to what our future will look like. The other ones that we had since the last team podcast were Rockay Socks. We talked with Daniel Chabert, who's the founder there, and they're using recycled ocean plastic with a special treatment that allows the sock not to become smelly. So you only have to wash these socks like 1 out of every 10 runs instead of every run. So there's water savings and ocean plastic being used in combination.
And do they stay sort of comfortable and soft? I mean, smell is one thing, but getting kind of crusty and nasty is another.
Well, and so it uses a silver nitrate solution that is soaked into the material, basically, to prevent that smelliness. And that's I think a really interesting way of thinking about how our clothes can be more sustainable.
Well, and for things too, like if you're going on a hiking trip or a backpacking trip, where you're not going to be able, you're limited in what you can pack, and you're not going to be able to wash things out very well. That's great.
And the other one, which was released on November 8th, was an interview with PNW Metal Recycling Sean Daoud, who is a younger recycling executive in Portland, Oregon. And we talked about how to get into the recycling industry, how to look for a job, what kinds of jobs there are. And this is something that we did in association with the Institute for Scrap Recycling Industries, ISRI, of which we are a member. And it's a really good way to think about how you might contribute to sustainability, which a lot of people are thinking about as a career now. Yeah,
interesting. That's very good. Did it seem like there was good options for the future? Is that a good area of work to be going into?
Yeah, I mean, generally, it's a job that pays in the $60,000 to $70,000 range for working in the yard, driving the trucks, doing the hard work. And in terms of executive thinking, it's increasingly technical. It's increasingly complex, and they're managing more carefully to eliminate waste. So there's a lot of great challenges to solve in this industry, and to bring recycling together with other aspects of our reuse of materials too.
Well, those all sound like really good interviews. That'll be great to listen to.
Yeah. Check it out, folks.
Okay.
Well, you know what time it is.
What time is it, Mitch?
It's Earthling question time.
Earthling questions. Yay. Okay. So the first one up, Nicholas on Facebook. He says, "Hi, I'm not sure if I can put metal bed frame pieces in the recycling bin or if I have to go to a facility for that."
Well, so this is one of those, it depends on where you live questions. Some recycling programs, if you can fit the pieces into the bin, will accept the pieces of a metal bed frame. On the other hand, most communities are going to require you to go to a transfer station to drop that off.
It's just, when you think about it, it's so big. I mean, depending on it, unless you've managed to cut the metal pieces down into small pieces. At least in my neighborhood, my recycling bin gets picked up and dumped into the back of a garbage truck, and I don't think that those large pieces of metal would go through that process very well.
Well, there are sorting capabilities in more materials recovery facilities that are called MRFs. So in the MRFs, there are these magnetic sorting tools that will get the metal out and handle it separately. The problem is that it can still get covered with stuff that might be contaminating at various other stages in the recycling process. And that's the overarching challenge of the American recycling system, is how do you get clean, well-sorted stuff to the people who can recycle it? So metal bed frames are relatively simple to sort out, but that is another cost that we're putting in. Buying these big magnetic sorters is not cheap.
Yeah.
That raises the overall cost of the stuff that we're trying to recycle. So this is one where you probably want to take it to your local transfer station.
Yeah, and I would add in, I think if it's a bed frame that's in good condition, if you're just moving to a different size bed or something, you want to do this, I would inquire both with the Habitat for Humanity people and maybe other folks who help provide housing materials to low-income people, because those bed frames, St. Vincent de Paul, we've got another group here in Tacoma that I can't remember what their name is that does this. But bed frames, it turns out, are surprisingly expensive and difficult to come by. So a lot of places that are trying to help outfit people in apartments would welcome your bed frame.
Yeah, great point.
If it's in good shape. If it's not in good shape, then I agree. I would take it to the facility.
Yeah.
So that's one. That's one. Josette on Facebook. This is a very timely question. Does she get a live or an artificial tree?
I like this one too. So our suggestion, and it's one that I've done in the past, is to get a live tree in a pot. Mm-hmm. And after you're done with it, put it out on the back porch and use it again the next year. And then when it gets too big, plant it in your yard and get a new tree in a pot. That way you have the experience of being around your Christmas tree all year long. You can decorate it at Christmas time, keep it watered, and put it back outside. But if you're going to make a decision between a live tree, that is a cut tree, and an artificial tree, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. So first off, the live tree can be composted, and if it's grown sustainably locally, it's the much more efficient way in terms of carbon footprint to get a tree. It goes back into the earth as compost. It comes out of the earth as local labor. And of course, when you grow a tree, you sequester some carbon at the same time. So the live tree is the better way to go. If you've got a live tree that's transported, say, from New York State to California, right, that's not a good choice. Yeah. So you do need to ask questions about where the trees that you're buying come from. Mm-hmm. Artificial trees, they're almost impossible to recycle because they combine plastic, metal, and in many cases electronics that can't be separated manually. You have to tear the thing apart. And so it's unless you're going to buy a tree and use it for years and years and years and years and years, the live tree is always going to be the more sustainable approach.
Yeah. Plus with
but buy local.
Live tree, you get that nice smell too. Mm-hmm. So that's a positive.
And again, I loved the potted tree. It was a great experience. And my kids liked it because all year long they were looking at their Christmas tree. Mm-hmm.
So our last question from Peggy on Facebook. Peggy says, I went to Best Buy's, but they moved the bins. And when I asked where the gentleman said, only if you pick up products ordered. So I think she's talking about, what do you think, like the bins
Best Buy has bins generally at the front of the store
for like printer cartridges and
batteries and small electronics.
Okay.
You can also take to the customer service or Geek Squad counter electronics that they sell or that come from other retailers. They'll take it all back. They do a great job. So does Staples. Mm-hmm. But in this case, Peggy went to a Florida Best Buy where they said, no, we move the bins back to where you pick up products, and you can only pick up, or you can only drop stuff off if you're picking up a product.
Oh.
Well, that doesn't map to what Best Buy has told us. So we went ahead and we contacted Best Buy corporate headquarters.
Oh, good.
And this particular Best Buy is breaking the rules. There is no requirement that you buy anything. You can recycle stuff at Best Buy whether you buy something or not. And we have a written confirmation of this from Best Buy corporate. So if Best Buy tells you that you have to buy something before you can recycle something, you tell them that is not the case and that they need to take it, or that you will call corporate headquarters.
That's right. You will lodge a formal complaint.
Well, action is the only way we're going to make people change.
That's true. Well, and with this, you just know it was someone's great, brilliant idea. Yeah. Why should everyone be able to drop off here? We're going to make it priority for our customers who are picking things up.
Yeah, and we'll add revenue.
Yeah, but no, I mean, that's not the point. The point is this enhances Best Buy's reputation, and frankly, people are much more likely to come back and buy things at Best Buy if they can also drop off their recycling there. So it is a positive Best Buy.
And my dog agrees.
Yes, your dog is in full voice, which is why I don't do my podcasting from my house. Otherwise, you'd hear mine too. Also, so I think that's it for us today.
It is, and the dog is telling me that it's time to go.
It's time to go, and they want some recycled toys, please.
There you go.
There you go. All right. Well, thanks for listening to Sustainability in Your Ear. We hope you tune in regularly, and we'd love to hear your feedback. So send us an email, feedback@earth911.com. Get a hold of us online on our website and participate in the forums. You can find us where you find all of your podcasts, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.